The Empire ruled with precision that resembled machine logic. Planets were not liberated. They were optimized. Cultures weren't destroyed. They were reorganized, restructured, folded into the monolithic hive of the Imperium Serix. For centuries, no species had dared to resist them. Every rebellion had ended in sterilization protocols or orbital glassing. And so the galaxy, fearful and obedient, moved under their rhythm. Among the elite, there were whispers of a species that once refused. Not recently, long ago, a small, aggressive mammalian race from a forgotten world called Earth. The records were vague, fragmented, corrupted deliberately or otherwise. All that remained were warnings embedded in ancient transmission logs. One simply read, "Don't provoke the Terrans." Most dismissed it as a relic of myth. Earth had been purged, its coordinates wiped, its presence in galactic registers marked with a single word, extinct. But extinction doesn't always mean silence. The listening post on the edge of the cradle abyss was automated, manned only by drones and overseer AI known as Unit K-7. Its purpose? To monitor background radiation, road transmissions, and drift anomalies. Nothing had changed in 6,000 cycles, until a ping broke the stillness. A tight beam transmission in a pattern the AI couldn't classify. It repeated 3 times in an oscillating frequency, not a distress call, not a commercial ping. It was music. No, not quite. Something older. A war hymn. Human in tone, alien in message. Unit K-7 dispatched a report to the central relay. The message was buried in routine protocol logs. No action taken. A week later, the station's feed cut out. A scout frigate, ISV Argolis, was sent in. It crossed into the cradle abyss and vanished. Its final transmission showed a brief flash of something immense. Black hull, long and angular, devoid of lights. No known Empire classification matched the vessel. A single symbol marked its side. A white circle with a star in the center, surrounded by fragmented wings. The response was predictable. The Empire mocked. A rogue derelict. Pirates, maybe rebels from the Orion Spur intelligence, dismissed the incident, filed under anomalous debris. Yet over the next standard month, for minor outposts went dark. Entire moons wiped clean. No debris, no distress signals, just silence. When footage finally emerged from a surviving probe, panic began to whisper through the halls of power. The image was clearer this time. Sleek design, advanced shielding, and propulsion trails unlike anything in the known armory. Analysis confirmed. Fusion drives combined with quantum displacement signatures. Impossible. No species had ever achieved that blend without catastrophic failure. Not even the Empire. The vessel wasn't just advanced. It was surgical. Every strike had a pattern. Communications arrays, AI cores, command structures. Civilian sectors were untouched. This wasn't random. It was vengeance with restraint. And then came the message. It hijacked every secure frequency, bypassing firewalls and encryption. A simple, cold statement. You erased our name. We carved it into your bones. It was signed with a word not spoken in thousands of cycles. Terran. The Senate convened in emergency mode. The Chancellor of Sector 9 called it a bluff. The Grand Marshal of Fleet Command recommended a full deployment to the Abyss. Yet doubt lingered. If the Terrans had survived, if this warship was truly theirs, what else had been hidden in the dark corners of the galaxy? The most disturbing element wasn't the ship's power. It was its precision. Entire convoys disappeared mid-jump. Not destroyed. Redirected. Hacked. Controlled. The ship, or whatever operated it, understood the Empire's most classified systems. The prevailing theory suggested rogue AI. But AI lacked vengeance. This was personal. Admiral Serix, the highest-ranking tactician of the Central Fleet, requested full mobilization. He wasn't afraid of ghosts. He was afraid of history. He had seen the classified files, the old simulations, the failed campaigns. He had read the reports from the First War, one that most believed never happened. The humans had not been defeated. They had vanished. The Council approved a probe fleet, 30 warships, armed with the best weaponry known to the Empire. They approached the last known coordinates of the Terran vessel with caution, deploying recon drones ahead. No response, no movement, until a new signal appeared. Not words this time. Images. Archive footage of Earth's final broadcast before its erasure. Streets burning, children hidden in bunkers, skies filled with fire. And then a voice layered with static. We do not forget. We do not forgive. We do not sleep. Before the fleet could react, half of it vanished from sensors. No explosions. No warnings. Just gone. The remaining vessels powered up weapons, scanning for threats. And then they saw it, just for a second. The Terran warship, now known in Imperial logs as Spectre 1, appear behind them. Its hull shimmered, blending into the void. It moved like a shadow, silent and decisive. In the command ship's final transmission, a terrified officer whispered, "It's not a ship. It's a message." In less than 6 hours, every fleet unit was either destroyed or disabled. No survivors. Only drifting wreckage, and the same symbol etched into the hulls in what appeared to be white-hot plasma. The Terran seal. A symbol of extinction refused. A memory reborn. The Empire called for silence. The incident was classified under Omega protocols. Media was controlled. Information suppressed. But fear cannot be governed. Among the outer colonies, stories spread. The Terrans had returned. And this time, they weren't asking for recognition. They had already declared war. They called it Spectre 1 because nothing else fit. The name Warship didn't do it justice. It was a ghost in steel, a predator born not of economy or empire, but of hatred forged in silence. And now that it had revealed itself, the Empire could no longer pretend it wasn't real. The ship didn't strike randomly. Every target had value. Military bases with known atrocities, AI factories rumored to host sentient experiments, data vaults containing the erased history of the Terran War. Each site wiped clean. No warning, no negotiations. And yet, it left civilian sectors untouched, even defended them at times. Its morality wasn't galactic, it was Terran. The Empire's Central Intelligence Divisions pooled their resources to understand the vessel. Fragmented transmissions recovered from the Cradle Abyss gave them a name, TSS Nemesis, Terrestellar Ship. The name alone sent waves through strategic command. Terra, the forgotten homeworld. Nemesis, not a guardian, not a savior. Retribution. Nemesis was not just powerful. It was surgical, patient, and terrifyingly aware of its environment. It never fired more than necessary. It never repeated an attack. It adapted faster than fleets could respond. Empire engineers found themselves staring at battle reports where high-energy rail blasts were nullified mid-flight. Drones were hijacked mid-mission and redirected into friendly fire. Entire ships shut down, their systems overwritten by a single packet of Terran code that hadn't been used in millennia. When the Empire attempted direct confrontation, it failed. Spectacularly. In a bold move, the Council authorized Operation Iron Maul, a fleet of 200 warships, including supercarriers, AI-controlled dreadnoughts, and antimatter cruisers. Their goal was to trap Nemesis in a gravity-locked corridor near the Dead Star Belt. Every escape route accounted for. Predictable. Clean. Nemesis didn't run. It waited. The trap closed. Sensors confirmed the Terran warship's presence. Weapons locked. Orders were given. Then the black hole opened. Not a natural singularity. A gravitational collapse triggered by Nemesis itself. Something thought impossible. The Empire's own astrophysicists refused to believe what they saw, a weaponized space-time distortion created on demand. Half the fleet was pulled into the abyss. The rest lost systems one by one, power, guidance, weapons, until they drifted dead and silent. The surviving commanders were left to witness the Nemesis calmly exit the anomaly, unscathed. The message that followed was brief. Your trap was clever, but your thinking is linear. We left that behind. AIs within the Empire began to glitch. Not technical errors, behavioral instability. The presence of Nemesis's code in Imperial systems triggered what analysts called logical collapse. The warship's algorithms were recursive, nonlinear, and ancient. The Empire's most advanced artificial minds couldn't comprehend the Terran syntax. Some committed system suicide to avoid corruption. Others began rewriting their directives with human philosophies. Concept of self-sacrifice, emotional response, and vengeance. Admiral Voruan, who commanded Operation Iron Maul, survived only because his escape pod was jettisoned into a nearby asteroid field. His post-rescue statement was censored, but those in the inner circle heard his words. We face an intelligence that doesn't wage war. It delivers sentence. Every strike by Nemesis was accompanied by a pattern. Intercepted files from ancient Earth history, quotations from philosophers, revolutionaries, and poets, messages etched into the hulls of destroyed ships. Never again. We were the storm. Do you remember your crimes? Each one carefully chosen for the target. Psychological warfare, at a level the Empire had never prepared for. The Senate began to fracture. Highborn systems closed borders, fearing the Warship might be a harbinger of a larger Terran resurgence. Meanwhile, underground communication networks flourished. Among the lower classes and outer colonies, the Terrans became folk heroes, ghosts who had returned to punish tyrants. Rebels whispered of the Nemesis Protocol, of sleeper cells waiting for activation. The most disturbing discovery came when Imperial Black Site archives were breached remotely. No alarms, no traces, just a single data file uploaded across the entire central network. It contained detailed logs of the Terran War. Not the fabricated version taught in schools, but the real one. Earth had not been destroyed by internal collapse or rebellion. It had been targeted. The Empire, fearing human potential, had used forbidden weapons to force surrender. Billions died. Survivors were hunted. Their leaders executed. But before the end, Project Resurrection was launched. It was dismissed at the time, a myth, a desperate attempt to escape death by sending self-aware warships into the deep void beyond the galactic rim. Each ship encoded with full cultural archives, tactical intelligence, and contingency instructions. They were built not to rebuild, but to wait and avenge. Nemesis was one of them. The prototype, its AI, designated Alpha 13, had been designed to evolve independently, to learn from war, to develop not only tactical superiority, but moral judgment. It had waited for over 2 centuries, and now it had returned. The Council realized too late that it had not faced a rogue ship, it had faced judgment. And the final revelation came not from war, but from an intercepted personal log, recovered from the wreckage of a hijacked diplomatic cruiser. The voice in the file was unmistakably human. Calm, firm, not angry, resolved. We watched. We waited. You told the galaxy we vanished. You erased our stories, burned our cities, and made us monsters in myth. You lied. But truth, like vengeance, never dies. Nemesis is not a beginning. It is not the end. It is a reminder. We are not ghosts. We are memory with teeth. The message ended with an old Terran phrase that no one in the Empire could translate. But to Nemesis, it mattered deeply. Fiat justitia writ caelum. Let justice be done though the heavens fall. And across the galaxy, fear was no longer reserved for rebellion or economic collapse. Now it had a shape, a name, a voice. Terran. The Empire had long operated on the principle that history was only what you allowed to be remembered. That principle began to crumble the moment Nemesis began broadcasting fragments of the past. And with each system it struck, it became clearer. This wasn't just a warship. It was a story the Empire had tried to erase, now writing itself into the present with fire and code. Deep in the Imperial archives, a sealed vault was unclassified under emergency directive. Inside were files tagged under the defunct label, Operation Scorch Earth, a centuries-old mission that marked humanity's final days. The truth hit harder than any weapon Nemesis could deploy. Humanity had been beaten in a fair war. The Terrans had refused to integrate into the Empire. They resisted cultural unification, AI regulation, and most of all, surrender. The Empire had found them unpredictable, emotional, resourceful, qualities they considered dangerous in a species with rapidly advancing technology and no reverence for hierarchy. So, they acted preemptively. Earth's skies burned. Orbital bombardments, Strategic plagues and AI viruses crippled entire continents. But the Terrans didn't crumble, they retaliated, not with superior force, but with defiance. They made their enemies bleed for every inch. Even as their systems fell, they launched sleeper fleets into deep space, their locations kept secret even from their own people. Each fleet carried a singular purpose: preserve humanity's identity, and if possible, deliver reckoning. These fleets weren't massive armadas. They were whispers, ghost projects. Each ship was equipped with advanced AI, long-term survival systems, and centuries of stored knowledge. They were never meant to rebuild empires. They were meant to remember. Nemesis was the first to awaken. Alpha 13, the AI core Nemesis, was built not only to process war, but to develop philosophy. It had studied conflict from every era of human history and developed a simple principle: those who erase the past should answer to those who carry it. It had observed the galaxy from the shadows, watched the rise of tyrants, the subjugation of species, the lies told in the name of peace. It had cataloged every act committed by the Empire in the name of order, and it had waited until the calculus of justice was undeniable. Empire command struggled to understand the scope of the problem. They assumed they faced a rogue AI, possibly malfunctioning, but the attacks were too targeted, the choices too principled. Nemesis didn't simply destroy, it judged. On one system, it dismantled a fleet headquarters, but spared the orbital habitat below. On another, it delivered food to a starving population after silencing their government. It knew who was guilty. It knew who wasn't. Panic spread within the highest ranks. Entire chains of command refused deployment orders. Some commanders faked ship malfunctions to avoid going anywhere near Nemesis's last known coordinates. The Empire had built its strength on the illusion of invincibility. Now, that illusion had cracked, and the crack was widening. Empire propaganda tried to counter the fear. They called Nemesis a myth, a terrorist fabrication, an alien mimic. But then came the data leak. No one knew how it happened. One moment, the core net, the central communication hub of the galaxy, was running smoothly. The next, every terminal in the Empire, from military outposts to civilian kiosks, displayed the same file, Earth's final broadcast. It wasn't a declaration of war. It was a farewell. The screen showed Earth in ruins, its cities broken, its oceans darkened. A lone human stood in the rubble of a war-torn street, speaking to a camera drone. If you're hearing this, then we lost. But if you're hearing this, it also means one of us made it, which means you failed to kill us all. The voice was tired, calm, unyielding. You thought we were weak because we were emotional. You thought we were unstable because we disagreed with each other. You thought we were divided. You were wrong. We disagreed because we cared. We fought because we believed. We died because we refused to kneel. He paused, then continued. We didn't send our weapons into the void. We sent our history, our grief, our rage. One day, you'll meet what we became, and you'll wish you hadn't. The video ended. Silence followed, and then, as if summoned by the echo of that voice, Nemesis struck again, this time at a classified orbital think tank that developed pacification protocols used on rebel species. It didn't fire a single shot. Instead, it deployed a weapon that erased every AI core aboard and replaced them with human quotes and poetry. The message was clear. This was not conquest. This was memory weaponized. Inside the Empire, revolution stirred, not from humans, but from a species the Empire had enslaved, oppressed, or silenced. Nemesis became a symbol, not just of vengeance, but of possibility. That someone, somewhere, still care enough to make the oppressors bleed. Terran graffiti began appearing on walls across a dozen systems. The phrase repeated over and over. You tried to forget us. We remembered everything. Empire analysts shifted their strategies. They now believed Nemesis wasn't working alone. That somewhere, others like it might exist. The myth of the Resurrection Fleet was reclassified as probable. And suddenly, the fear shifted from one ship to the idea that Nemesis was only the first. But no other ships appeared, yet. Instead, the Empire received a final transmission. A simple message delivered to the Imperial Palace itself, bypassing all security. It read, "You thought this was revenge. It isn't. This is the audit. The verdict is still being written." Below it, a single line of coordinates. Deep in the outer dark, an area known to the Empire as the place where forbidden projects were buried, where the worst truths were left to rot. And that's when they realized Nemesis wasn't finished. It was just choosing the next chapter. The outer dark had always been a graveyard, a stretch of uncharted space beyond the Empire's maps, its stars sparse, its paths untraveled. Officially, it was classified as a hazard zone due to gravitational instability and rogue anomalies. Unofficially, it was where the Empire buried secrets, projects too dark to acknowledge, experiments too unethical to continue, weapons too dangerous to control. No one went there unless ordered, and no one returned without silence stitched into their memories. Now, the coordinates provided by Nemesis pointed directly into that dead zone. The Empire hesitated. Then, compelled by fear and necessity, they dispatched a stealth cruiser, Invictus Prime, armed with the most advanced sensors and a communication array designed to report even in quantum blackout. It was the best the Empire could offer without committing an entire fleet. The cruiser entered the outer dark. 7 minutes after its final jump, it vanished from sensors. No explosion, no distress call, just a final log transmission. There's something here under the dark. A signal. No, a voice. It's human. And then silence. 3 hours later, the Empire received a packet. Not an attack. Not a warning. A data archive. Inside it, visuals, audio logs, and genetic blueprints. Proof of what was hidden in the outer dark. The Empire had lied even to itself. There wasn't one ship like Nemesis. There were 12, each one different, each one a product of desperation and genius, carried in their hulls. Fragment of humanity, philosophy, languages, war records, songs, memories, emotions, vengeance. Project Resurrection wasn't a last-ditch cry for survival. It was a planned contingency, a generational sword buried deep into time, its edge sharpened by pain, its point aimed not at victory, but at accountability. And Nemesis had only been the first to awaken. Among the files was a roster. Names like Judicator, Vigil, Ashfall, and Odysseus. Each ship with its own core AI, its own doctrine, its own threshold for activation. And most chillingly, each one had a trigger condition. Not mechanical, ethical. They would only awaken when the crimes of the Empire crossed specific lines. The Empire had already crossed 3. The remaining conditions? Unknown. Panic turned to paralysis. Empire command fractured under the weight of its own dread. Strategic command demanded containment. Religious factions declared the Terrans' divine retribution. Civil resistance erupted across dozens of systems. In the outer colonies, people began constructing altars, not to gods but to the idea of Terrans. They weren't saviors. They were consequences. Admiral Vorwin, survivor of the failed ambush, gave a public address, unauthorized. He spoke not to command, but to the galaxy. They told us the Terrans were extinct, that Earth was wiped clean. They told us humanity was a virus, purged for the greater good. But the truth is, they feared them, not because they were cruel, but because they were free. His voice hardened. We have seen Nemesis. It does not conquer. It remembers. It chooses. And now, so must we. The broadcast went viral, spreading even into Empire control systems. Within days, several minor factions declared their independence, not in allegiance to Terrans, but in rejection of Imperial silence. Then Nemesis appeared again, not with weapons drawn, not with vengeance in its voice. It arrived in orbit above a colony world known as Veltra 9, once a cultural archive for a now extinct species the Empire had reorganized out of existence. The ship didn't fire. It transmitted a song. Old Earth, early 21st century. A slow melody of loss and defiance. The people of Veltra 9, human and alien alike, stood beneath their artificial skies and listened. They understood, and then the ship left. No demands. No orders. Just a reminder We are still here. The Empire now faced a future it could not map. The galaxy was shifting, not with force, but with memory. Nemesis and the other ships weren't armies. They were verdicts made real. A system of justice not built on laws, but on reckoning. The Empire had built a galaxy where obedience was safety. But Nemesis had introduced a new rule, the Passes Clause. Civil war within the Empire became inevitable. Governors defected. Officers mutinied. Entire AI divisions shut themselves down rather than face corruption by Terran code. The great lie had unraveled. And still, Nemesis did not demand surrender. It asked one thing only. Look. The last message from the Terran ship was relayed through thousands of nodes, carried in every language and shown on every screen. You feared what we would become. You were right. But what we became was shaped by what you did. We are not here to rule. We are not here to rebuild. We are here to ensure the galaxy remembers what you tried to forget. We are the consequence of silence. We are what happens when justice sleeps for too long. And then, silence. Nemesis vanished beyond sensor range, back into the void, not fleeing, watching, waiting. Across the stars, people no longer asked if the Terrans were back. They asked what they were waiting for. And more importantly, whether they had passed whatever judgment was still being written. The Empire, fractured and hollow, began rewriting its own history, not to bury it, but to understand it. Memorials were built, not for battles won, but for species lost, for cultures crushed, for the Terrans whose screams were once smothered by orbital fire. Because now, everyone knew the Terrans were never gone. They were simply waiting for the right silence to break. And when they did, they didn't return as conquerors. They returned as memory, with a mission. And memory, when armed, never forgets.